Okay guys, so welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be probably one of the most simple concepts that I'll kind of discuss when it comes to being a better runner. If you haven't watched the channel before, my name's Scullion. I'm an Irish Olympic marathon runner and I'm going to take grief in the comments, but I do run 2:09 for the marathon. I've been doing this a long time, probably for 20 plus years. And the reason today's video is so important, because even after 20 plus years of being a runner, actively training most days, trying to get faster, trying to enjoy running more, I still forget some of the very basics that can lead to you being a better runner. Better runner, think of it as an idea and not so much everything being governed by speed. But usually when you put little things in place to be a better runner, it can lead to being a faster runner. So we will come back to that. Sometimes we neglect some of the very basics because perhaps we've put overemphasis on another part of the running, call it, patchwork quilt. I think that's one of the best sort of descriptions I ever heard of what makes you a good runner, right? And you've got this patchwork quilt and let's pretend there's, 9 pieces. And each of these pieces all contribute to being a better runner. And altitude would have been one of those pieces, but nutrition is one of those pieces. And strength and conditioning is one of those pieces. And your actual training and the running that you're doing is one of those pieces. And then sleep. And in other words, you can't put too much emphasis on one piece of your patchwork quilt. You need to make sure that all of the pieces are in a pretty good place. Sometimes we get so carried away with maybe the new fad at the time or the new idea that's going to make you really good. And that's a natural human thing to get excited about, because when you do something and you realize that, okay, to be a better runner, perhaps I'm going to have to train for, all this year and then all of next year and all the year after that. Well, when a new fad comes along, it gets you excited and motivated and sort of reignites that this is it. This is the thing that's going to make me better. And sometimes the simple part of all this is just coming back down to earth, ignoring some of the little fads and just ticking off the basic things as well as you can. I wake up some days and all I have to do that day for training, like today, it's a Monday, it's a super, super easy day, and all I have to do is 2 10K runs. Because these days sometimes are like the boring days, my brain always tries to think of how I could make that day a little bit more something, right? It's trying to think, could I add in some sprints? Maybe we should do a hilly run. It's always trying to make something that is super simple, super basic, more, right? And then I've sort of found that the more you steer off the simple and the basic, it's like a slippery slope, right? So suddenly Monday run, you're 10K easy, you get carried away, you run it a little bit quicker, you do 12K, 14K maybe, because you think to yourself, well, I could do 14K in the morning and then I could do a little bit less that night, or I could do the same that night, another 10K, and then that's kind of more today, right? So you've already allowed a very simple plan to turn into something different. And then what happens is the rest of that week, things just start to slide around a little bit. Tuesday, that perhaps was also a pretty simple day, maybe it was just a basic tempo run or some intervals or some hills, suddenly your brain comes up with another little idea that you could make that day into something a little bit more. You could do that a bit quicker. Maybe you should do the session that you did before a previous race that went really well and you'd like to see if you could do that session. There's always a reason, there's always a little justification for some of these movement patterns, but most of the time they're just getting in the way. They lead to little interruptions, they lead to little injuries popping up. Sometimes they lead to frustration because you're not ready to perhaps do that session yet. And then because a lot of running is in that motivation and it's in that consistency of that motivation, you move into a little slump, but it was self-provoked. So sometimes what you've got to do is you've got to wake up on a Monday morning and you've got to outline the week's training, and you've got to outline, you know, the bare basics, and you say to yourself, what can I do over this next week of training that would make me a better athlete in 1 week's time? Handle your basics really well, which means if Monday's a recovery day, really nail down that recovery day. And we're not talking about being aggressive about it, just get the recovery day done. Do it well, do a little bit of stretching, do a little bit of your rehab. Stretch and rehab, all these routines is on joggingroom.com. If you don't really know what I'm talking about, the foam rolling, the recovery ball stuff, the, you know, massage gun, little bits of rehab to keep injuries at bay, you can check that out. But we're going to nail that day. And then Tuesday, we're going to go do maybe our intervals. But we're not going to get carried away. We're just going to do them at the right intensity. Instead of doing, you know, an extra few reps, well, we're just going to do the right amount of reps. So in other words, we're going to execute the training week exactly as it's set. Not try to add to it, not try to take away. Get it done. Then maybe we're going to say to ourselves, let's really focus on hydration this week. Let's nail down hydration. Let's make sure that between training we're sipping on water. Let's make sure that from a recovery standpoint we're eating pretty close to training. We're really nailing down the basics. And then we're going to say to ourselves, do you know what could really help this week? Maybe at 9 o'clock at night we turn that phone off. That phone that we sit on from 9 o'clock to maybe 11 o'clock, scrolling, swiping, watching Scully's YouTube, subscribing, hitting that like button and that subscribe button. I'm joking. Maybe we turn that off at 9 o'clock, even if it means not watching my video and not subscribing. But we turn that off and we set that down. And instead of trying to add something sexy to the Monday run or to the intervals or do a few more, we just take care of those little things. We eat that little bit better, we sleep that little bit better, we look after our little bit of rehab, and do you know what we've done? We've just bought ourselves a free week of training, right? A free week of training from a, where's my body at the end of that week? So training, the way you want it to be is that you want to get through the week with the minimal cost on the body. Because if it's cost the body less, that means that moving into the next week, you're in a better place to take care of that next week. Nothing in running is free. I was doing my training in Portugal. It went really, really well. But the second you get greedy, right? Double threshold, should have took a couple of easy days, double threshold, you know, VO2 max hills, threshold that night. All of a sudden, right hip, little bit tired. And then what happens is you're on this high and you're riding this high and you're all excited about the splits and the momentum's brilliant. And then suddenly you feel vulnerable because it's like, hips a bit sore, maybe back's a little bit tight. And then you move into this sort of like headspace of a bit of vulnerability. And once you move into that, I'm a little bit vulnerable headspace, things can get a bit rocky. So today's video, I think, was really important because I think we get carried away in we want to be better. Running is an unfair sport sometimes. I've watched some of the best athletes in the world train. I've trained alongside some of the best athletes in the world. You know, I've just watched people give it everything they have because all they want to do is be a little bit better than yesterday, right? We wake up, we're like a burning furnace, or I often think of a steam, or even just think of the kettle steaming on the grill. If you used to have the oven top hot plate, doesn't matter, and it's whistling. You just have to turn that knob down a little bit because you can't be better every single day. So the advice here is sometimes you have to be okay with just ticking off another week, but understanding that that's all it took, right? To be better, to be in a better place in a week's time, that's all it took. And I made this decision back in December, and all I said was by, the end of the month, hypothetically, if I was going to do another fitness test, I just wanted things to be in a slightly better place. And I had to be okay with doing that little bit less. And so many runners, sadly, don't get to see how good they can be because how unfair is this? Because you're trying too hard. How unfair is it that you want to be better at running, but because you're pushing too hard, you're trying too hard, you're overcommitting, you end up injured, tired, fatigued, and don't get the race result that you bloody deserve. So sometimes you just have to take that little step back in order to be better. You have to calm things down to be a little bit better. You have to wake up and say, today I can't go at this at 110 miles per hour. I have to calm things down a little bit, and I have to be okay with just building another solid week. Back off that little bit, because could you imagine getting to the end of your career and realizing that the way to be better was to actually do a little bit less, to not be so aggressive with some of the training, but to work on some of the fundamental basics like your sleep, your nutrition, your hydration, your strength work. Sometimes that's the boring stuff, but that's the stuff that's going to make you better. So there's heaps more tips and stuff like that on the website, joggingroom.com. That is your strength stuff, your recovery stuff, the boring basics, the nutrition. But sometimes that's where your emphasis must go, and your emphasis must come away from being super aggressive with the training every day. Be okay with just doing the boring basics and watch the weeks stack up and your running get to a much better place. Your races go a lot better. Like, subscribe, do all those lovely things, and I hope you enjoyed today's video.